So in this lesson, we're going to talk about the training and exercise planning workshop. The exercise is the test, the training is the teaching to prepare for the test, and our training and exercise plan helps us ensure that we provide the training that we need for those capabilities that we're building or sustaining, and that we test them after they've been trained. And over the course of several years, we want to integrate that testing process from this capability to that capability, from private industries to airports to hospitals to schools, city agencies, county agencies. So the training and exercise plan is one of those whole community activities that we do. But remember, we're at the emergency program level. We're at the program management level. So we're building these long-range projections for what we're trying to do. The bottom bullet there you'll notice is the rolling summary report. This is another tool at the program management level that helps us with how have we done. It's kind of the backward-looking collection trend analysis of what, we knew where we wanted to go. How does it look now that we turn around and look back? So the TEP looks forward, the rolling summary report looks back. Again, this is a program level planning. Depending on whatever grants may guide the way you operate or whatever state or federal agencies may require various exercise schedule requirements, the training and exercise plan is usually done on an annual basis. That's what FEMA recommends. And the goal here is that we're looking out several years. Well, we don't want to plan something for 4 or 5 years from now and not come back to it closer and say, well, we need to tweak a little bit here, we need to adjust a little bit there. So by holding this on a regular basis, we can start planning out, hey, I want to request this class from FEMA, I want to request this class from the FAA, I want to request this class from the Joint Commission for a hospital program. And you may have to project it 12, 15, 18 months out. So you build that into your calendar and you have that training built in there. And then after you've done this training, give them a chance to practice it through the smaller exercises and then build up to the bigger exercises. So that helps us include everybody's needs and improve as we go. One of the things that we have to do is prioritize. I don't know about y'all, but I don't have enough money to do everything my kids want to do. So we have to prioritize what we're going to do. And it's the same for emergency management programs. We have to prioritize what we can do. If we want to bring that ambulance on and we know it takes 2 years to get that ambulance in, we've got to figure out that we've got to train somewhere, right before the end of that 2 years so that the people on that ambulance are prepared to operate that ambulance. We need to give them the chance to work on it a little while, so somewhere out in that 3rd year, we need to have them in one of the bigger exercises to really make sure that they know how to do what we've asked them to do. So by having this training and exercise planning workshop to build the training and exercise plan, we're able to coordinate those activities so that we can maximize our benefit, get as much bang for the buck as we can. And so we bring in our partners, all right? So hospitals have to exercise, airports have to exercise, schools have to exercise. If we all have to exercise and we all plan together to conduct one exercise, how much money did we just save? A whole bunch. And a lot of these folks have got grants or they've got programmed budget for these activities so that we can kind of share those benefits. So who are our whole community participants? Yes, you can cheat. This is in your book. So let's talk about it. Who are some of our whole community partners? Say again? The Red Cross. Absolutely. Our volunteer agencies are very important for a lot of the things that we do. They help us with our animals. They help us during the disaster with sheltering. They help us after the disaster by going in and helping people clean up the rubbish and the debris of their program and their community and put it back together, the buildings and the homes and the daycare centers and what have you. Who else is important in our whole community? Churches, absolutely. Churches can be shelters. They can provide spiritual support. They do a lot of food service. They work with other volunteer groups to provide food service. So churches are a great resource. They also happen to have a great way to bring in specific things. If we need baby diapers, if we need young children's clothing. You know, my kids aren't young children anymore, but if I have things that they've outgrown, I know that I can donate and it will go to help. Who else is a good partner in our community? School districts. School districts are great on so many levels for so many things. Yes, they have public transportation. It may not be the most comfortable in the world, but it works. They have drivers that know how to operate those buses. They have maintainers that know how to keep those buses running. They have fuel tanks to keep those buses operating. They have buildings. We can use those buildings for all kinds of things. We can use them for shelters. We can use them for PODs, for pods. Now remember, there's two kinds of pods. There's a point of dispensing, which is a medical thing where you're handing out the strategic national stockpile drugs and whatever, but there's also the points of distribution, which are food, water, and ice kinds of distributions. So schools are great. Usually have pretty good parking lots. They usually have traffic flow patterns already established, and the community knows where they are. Schools are very important partners. Who else are partners in our neighborhood?
Your nonprofits.
All the nonprofits. Just as a curiosity, is there anyone here of the Jewish faith? Okay, so I apologize, I will probably pronounce this wrong. B'nai B'rith, I think it's pronounced, is a part of the Jewish outreach program. And these people have got clothing down pat. You're in a shelter. Little Johnny is 8 years old and he wears size 6 clothes and he needs clothes. He's lost everything in the disaster. This organization will bring little Johnny a box. In that box are 7 sets of clothes for little boys. It doesn't have any princesses on it. It's got tennis shoes. It's got underwear. If it's wintertime, it'll have some sort of a jacket. If it's summertime, they might even have swim trunks. Powerful, powerful organizations. Nonprofits do so many things. We talked about the animal shelters a little bit earlier in the class. So they're very, very powerful. They partner with our churches to provide spiritual support and mental health counseling in some cases. Who else is in our community?
Social media.
Social media. Well, the media in general is a big partner. The media provides us the opportunity to send out information. They also gather information for us, and sometimes it's what we want to hear, and sometimes it's not what we want to hear, but it's important for us to know both sides of it. They push us to do better. We can partner with the media on so many things. The American Red Cross has a center in Dallas that is for social media monitoring and mining and trend analysis. And during the recent floods for like the last 4 or 5 years, they have partnered with us and they're watching social media. So somebody posts out, you know, I'm at such and such address and I'm hanging on to my front yard tree because my house is completely underwater, so come save me. They share that with the local emergency management office, and that local emergency management office can say, okay, we've already got them, no, we need to go get them, and make sure that that information is shared. So social media is a powerful thing, and it's a complicated thing. It takes a lot of manpower to do that. So anyone who's going to be in that media component, I strongly encourage them to get training, and we offer that training here at TEPW. Who else is a good partner? Emergency responders, fire, police, EMS. We also have a lot of non-traditional emergency response partners, folks like public works, folks like schools and hospitals and churches. We don't think of them as responders, but when the stuff goes wrong, they're there to help us out. They don't run into the fire and chase down the bad guys, but they're there when we need them, and they're very important partners.
Secure utilities, walk roadways.
Oh yeah, yep. Yep, and they need to know what their roles and responsibilities are, and they need to know how to protect themselves. Medical facilities, we've mentioned hospitals and nursing homes, they're really having to step up now because of the new Medicare, Medicaid rules. And that's a good thing. That's bringing partners in that we haven't necessarily worked with closely in the past. So it's a positive but important part of our whole community, because those folks are going to require potentially a lot of resources. To evacuate a nursing home, we're probably talking multiple ambulances, ambuses, making multiple loops. And these people can't just go to some church or school and sit on a hard floor. They need care. So that's an important partnership. Social networking, we talked about that one. Businesses, why are businesses important? they got stuff. Okay? If we're talking about those petrochemical industries out there, they know what they have. They know about their methyl ethyl double death, and they've got the resources and the trained personnel so that when that methyl ethyl double death starts to escape, they know how to contain it, they know how to capture it, they know how to treat it, they know how, they've got all the technical stuff that they need to know to be able to do that right. We have a lot of poultry up in North Texas, chickens and turkeys and ducks and other birds. And their plants for processing that, they got a lot of dangerous equipment in it. Now, as a firefighter walking into that building with black smoke and I can't see past the outside of my mask, I want to know if I turn right at this juncture, I'm about to walk into a gigantic blade. That's my safety. I want to know that. So having those businesses involved with emergency management helps us be prepared and protect our first responders. Public transportation, we mentioned the school buses. Here in Austin, there's a very powerful partnership between Cap Metro, the public bus line, and the Austin ISD. They have a mutual aid agreement where bus drivers from either group can drive either group's buses. It's a very powerful partnership that they have there. They do a lot of training on that. Public transportation, why are taxis listed? Well, yes, they are transportation, but it's a single resource that can go out and to somebody's home, somebody that's got access and functional needs, and pick that person up and bring them into a central evacuation hub or a central shelter or a central care point. Go ahead.
Well, they also assist like when people are in shelters to take them to doctor's appointments.
Yes, yes, yes. They are a great door-to-door support. And a lot of them will reduce their fees as a donation because they get the tax write-off. But there's also, if you build that partnership and you build that mutual aid agreement, there's an opportunity that there may be some reimbursement to the city or county for those expenses. If the disaster is big enough, bad enough, ugly enough, we can get some reimbursement.
The other thing, if you're not familiar with that area, some of those taxi drivers, if you can get to them, they'll tell you, roadway signs are gone, they may know where it is, or they may know ways to get around.
Yep. Very good point. Very good point. Their knowledge. Taxis, do they have to only transport people? No, they can transport boxes. Tow trucks today don't really tow, they carry, right? That's another great resource for moving stuff. Great resource. And they're public transportation, but they're also a private partner. Schools and colleges we've talked about, MOUs and MOAs we've talked about. So this is our whole community. And while we can't necessarily have every single grocery store come to our training and exercise plan workshop, we can get their association to send a representative. And we can get them to say, yes, in this situation, we could do this, that, and the other. If we're going to lose power, let me donate the food, that way I can write it off as a tax expense, off my business taxes. That gives us food to give to the Red Cross and the churches and the schools to support the sheltering operations and to support our first responders. So by having the whole community at this training and exercise planning workshop, we get them to know one another, we get them to connect with one another, we get them to understand their individual capabilities and limitations, and we build the partnerships where A can support B to support C, and a bigger goal is achieved. So for those of you in emergency management, you look at these things and you probably have the acronym THIRA pop into your head. So THIRA is the Threat Hazard Identification and Risk Analysis. Basically is what could go wrong, as we were mentioning earlier, after action reports, the weather service, historical documentation. All of those things help us understand what could potentially go wrong in our area. It gives us the opportunity to explore our historical events, our training, the improvements that we've implemented in the past. It gives us the opportunity to look at our business partners and say, okay, so when's the last time that your facility had a leak? And how did you improve upon that so it shouldn't leak again? Or do you have new chemicals or new medicines to treat this chemical if it gets out beyond the fence? So those partnerships help us identify what the priorities are. If we just had a new school built, that new school is probably going to be a priority to make sure that we're familiar with the grounds, we're familiar with the access routes, we're familiar with where the stairs and the elevator are, the gas shut off, the water connection, all those things that we need to know about this new school. This is our opportunity to identify that as a priority in this training and exercise planning workshop. We identify those priorities. We identify the things that we know we have to do. Hospitals have to exercise every year. Airports have to exercise anywhere from once every year to once every 5 years, depending on how big the airport is. So we get all of those things together and we figure out what do we have to do for our partners in the community and what are our priorities that we want to work on. And then we use the THIRA here, again, the CPG 201, CPG Community Preparedness Guide, and we work as a community to understand what our threats and hazards are, what our capabilities need to be, and where perhaps we're not quite there yet. And that helps us identify the priorities going into the training and exercise plan. We need to link the things that we identify as a core capability, like the Swift Water Rescue Team, to those 31 in the old version, 32 in the new version of the National Preparedness Goal. And those links are very open. They're very open to interpretation. So is getting people from where the helicopter puts them on the ground to the shelter, is that critical transportation or is that mass care? It could go in either one and be completely correct. So this kind of gives the community the opportunity to say, I want to focus on critical transportation. Well, that's part of my critical transportation, but we don't need to do shelter training because we've already done that. We just need to sustain. So I'm focusing on how do I get these rescued people to a safe point. And so by looking at your priorities, you can link them to capabilities that you're working on collectively. And then which stakeholder organizations are part of that. Is it the school district? Is it the public transportation group? Is it the emergency medical task force and their ambuses? Is it something else? And that's part of what this group, this whole community group, can bring together. So we talked about the fact that the National Preparedness Goal gives us core capabilities and that there are 5 mission areas. So you have prevention and protection, mitigation, response, and recovery. So prevention and protection, those are very heavy in the law enforcement perspective and cybersecurity perspective, things like that. But it also applies to your facilities, all right? Many emergency operations centers in communities are secure facilities. As you noticed when you came in this building today, even though we're not the State Emergency Operations Center, we're part of TEPW and we have to have a badge to get into this building because we have access to community plans that if bad guys got a hold of them, they would know how to, figure out what our soft points are and be able to hurt us. But those two tend to go hand in hand a lot with law enforcement and cybersecurity. Mitigation, that covers every part of your community you can think of, and probably more that we can't think of. Response, that's, the hurricanes coming in, the rain is coming in, the tornadoes coming in, the manufacturing plant just had a building collapse, the school had a gas leak, any kind of thing where we have lights and sirens going down the side, that's response. But remember, we've got those other people like Public Works and the schools and the churches that support the first responders, and they're part of our response too. And then the last one is going to be recovery. Recovery takes a very, very, very long time and oftentimes incorporates prevention, protection, and mitigation as they recover because you try to get better than you were before during recovery. Now you'll notice the top 3 lines there, green, orange, and yellow. Those are common capabilities across all 5 mission areas: planning, public information and warning, and operational coordination. We plan, what are we going to do for mitigation? How do we build this retention lake? How do we build this bridge? Then we've got things like planning. Let's plan how we're going to respond if something goes wrong at this new school. You've got recovery. Well, if the school burns down or it's for whatever reason it can't be used for the next 4 or 5 months, the community needs to help the school district figure out how do we get these kids through their education and keep their lives as close to normal as possible while we put their school back together. Aaron, you may not have this in California. In Texas, our school districts are independent school districts. They're not part of the city or county government, and they're very serious about the independent part. They have their own leadership, their own taxing authority. The school grounds are sort of like private property within that organization. So they are a key partner that we literally have to mutual aid with. Again, for the purpose of the test, the National Preparedness Goal from 2011 says there are 31 core capabilities. The 15 version, the second edition, the 2015 version tells us there are 32. They added firefighting. So these are important. The other thing, in addition to those top 3 being common, you'll find that some of the others are common. Does my little red light work? Yeah. Oh, it doesn't work on that. So you'll notice that in the prevention column there's intelligence and information sharing. If you go over to protection and down one, you'll notice there's intelligence and information sharing. But if you read the description in the National Preparedness Goal, you'll see they're just a little bit different. And that helps you figure out what falls into the mission area for that capability. So, how do we go from understanding what our priorities are to actually figuring out the training and exercise components for our long-term plan? Look at the threats and hazards, areas for improvement. Where are our capabilities? What are our external resources, and requirements? And how do we accomplish those for our neighbors? That becomes our program priorities. If we want to work on that swift water rescue team, if we want to work on mass casualty so that we can do the hospital exercise and the school bus exercise together, that creates our program priorities within exercise, the training and exercise plan. From there, we can come up with specific objectives. Well, the hospital has to be able to test surge capacity. And for each hospital, what that surge capacity looks like is going to be a little bit different. For the school, if you've got one of the really, really long buses, or if you're talking about one of the smaller buses, or if you're working on a handicapped accessible bus, getting those students on and off those buses looks different, okay? So those become individual exercise objectives for the school or the hospital. And then once you get those objectives, you reference back to the National Preparedness Goal, and you can link to the core capabilities. This last link, the one for core capabilities, that's almost exclusively on us exercise specialists, which, welcome to the club. The hospital's not going to understand or care. The nursing home's not going to understand or care. The school's not going to understand or care. But as we are part of a bigger community, the county or the state or the nation, when we report back, we can say we practice the core capability of evacuation. We practice the core capability of health and medical services. We practice the core capability of whatever. So that's how they go from what do we need to do to feeding back into the National Preparedness Goal. So what we're going to do now, Peter, you can go ahead and turn the camera off, partner. Thank you very much.